Well, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, children of all ages, at the end of the last segment, or a few seconds ago, depending on how you're listening, I said that I was going to go in depth about the Bootista issue. Well, that's just the beauty of a pre-taped show, because you never know what's going to change, what's going to be edited out, and that's what makes it such a must-see or must-hear format. Because since I last spoke, they actually have completely turned Bootista heel. That was on the most recent SmackDown edition. So I'm going to touch on that, but it doesn't really matter so much now. So instead, I'm going to focus on my next topic, which is people power. And I don't mean John Laurinaitis people power, I mean actual people power. But first, regarding Bootista. You know, it's a fascinating time we're in the midst of right now as wrestling fans. And that's because it's a time of transition. Things are changing, and the evidence of that is deafening. And there's no finer example than Boutista's failed return. At least failed so far, up until his heel turn. And there's got to be a lot of people, certainly including Boutista himself, wondering, what gives? Why do people hate me so much? And to me, I think it's obvious. I think it's clear to anybody who's really been engrossed in the WWE of late, of 2012, 2013, early 2014, and seeing what's been resonating with the people, who they've been supporting, who they've been against. And so the simple answer is, he's just not likable. In his character, up until the heel turn, there's just nothing endearing about him. If you take a look at Daniel Bryan, and here's a guy who the WWE was not pushing to be this fan hero, and yet he gained this support that has been unparalleled. And this is because he's been naturally endearing. He's got this list of qualities that people just like in him. And Boutista is the polar opposite of every one of them. So if you take a look at Daniel Bryan, he's unassuming. And that is normally not a good thing for a wrestler. But in his case, it makes him seem down to earth. He seems like a real person. He doesn't seem so phony. He doesn't seem so full of himself. He's a hard worker. And I'm not saying that Boutista is not a hard worker, but I'm saying that Daniel Bryan worked for every single thing he got. At no point was he handpicked for a damn thing. He fought every inch of the way. Daniel Bryan is also an amazing wrestler. He's one of the best wrestlers of our time. He's also completely substance over style. Now, admittedly, he has his catchphrase, and, you know, I'm not going to say that's not a big part of his character and his success, because it absolutely is. But it all comes down to what happens in the ring. You know, the crowd are always into his matches. They're always into the high points of his matches, the turning points, even just when he's locking in moves, you know, real technical wrestling holds. The crowd love it. It's about the substance. It's not just about some cool factor. With Daniel Bryan, if you want somebody to understand his appeal, you've got to get them to watch one of his matches. You can't just say, listen to one of his promos or look at his entrance. They have to see what he's really about, and that is about wrestling. Also, he's humble. He's incredibly humble. I mean, he's humble on the microphone, on TV, but if you hear any of his interviews, you know, the guy's just so modest. You know, sometimes when you think, like, come on, man, like, you're experiencing this monumental success, and yeah, you don't need to be so modest about it all, but he is. And the final part of it is that he just seems like a nice guy. And here's what I find so interesting, because in 2014 and in 2013, that is something that people really want to support, that people want to cheer loudly for. But that wasn't always the case. See, Boutista is from a different era. You use the term era and it makes you think of lifetimes, you know, different ages. But in wrestling, it's all compressed. It's really short. 10 years is a huge, huge difference in wrestling. And Boutista, I guess 10 years ago, in 2004, by that time, that was when he was becoming huge. He had the Evolution storyline, and that's when he really broke out. Now, I actually was taking a hiatus over those years from around 2003 all the way through to around 2009. So when I came back, that was when Boutista was getting ready to leave, and that's when he was playing his heel character. And I didn't see much of that, but I liked what I did see. And I think that has worked against him quite heavily, because that taste was still in my mouth. When he came back, to me, he had that look about him. So all those traits that I listed of Daniel Bryan, let's now look at Boutista. Boutista is style over substance. He's the direct opposite. He's a musclehead. You know, this guy is about the look. I know he is, how do you say, not slimmed down, but he's dropped a lot of that bulk, certainly. But it's still, I mean, look at the way he parades himself. You know, he's very flashy. He's very look at me. The day he came back, a lot of people were fixating even on his dress sense, his style. I wasn't bothered by the way he dressed as such, but the way he carried himself. And he had that little, I don't know what you call it, that jacket thing, and he unzips it and he's got no top underneath and he's showing off his abs and his pecs. He felt really vain. He felt absolutely the opposite of the humble Daniel Bryan. And he might be humble in real life, but as far as how he's presenting himself on TV, he came across as arrogant. He came across as aloof, as the coolest guy in the room, and he knows he's the coolest guy in the room, and he's going to let everybody else know about it as well. So he puts himself across like a movie star, and per his television character lease, you know, he thinks he is a movie star. And so he has this larger-than-life feel, or at least he should do. He's doing everything seemingly right to have that larger-than-life feel, and maybe that's what it is. Maybe we just don't like that larger-than-life feel right now. I mean, in a sort of supernatural Undertaker kind of way, maybe a bit different. But if you look at CM Punk, if you look at Daniel Bryan, a lot of the criticisms has been, you wouldn't know that they're a wrestler. Well, maybe people like that now. It certainly seems like they do. It makes them more relatable. Bootista is not in any way relatable. And did I mention that he's not a great wrestler? He's not awful. If we're talking wrestling as in the complete product, not just locking in holds, but the complete match product. He's not that bad, but he's not great. He's certainly no Daniel Bryan and no CM Punk. And there's this real appreciation for that these days, which I love. I absolutely love that. And I mentioned quite flippantly at the start that sports entertainment and professional wrestling are the same thing. Well, that's why, because professional wrestling is entertaining. When you put on a brilliant match, everybody's entertained by it. Not just for hardcore internet fans, but all the fans in the building, because that's what they came for. We've been really programmed to think that entertainment has to be the quirky skits and things like that, and they've got their place in wrestling, but wrestling is entertaining, and more people are really expressing their love of that, and Bootista just can't bring that in a way that your Daniel Bryan, your Antonio Cesaro, just call me Cesaro, okay, and your CM Punks can bring that. So when you put it all together like some mad Frankenstein, you know what JBL likes to say, if you were to build a sports entertainer from the ground up, Michael, it would look like Randy Orton. Well, I think if you were to build a heel in 2014 from the ground up, it would be Bootista. It would be the returning babyface Bootista. And so they've recognized it. I mean, it's not like they had to analyze it by themselves. They had the crowd telling them, and they've turned him heel. So I think only good things can come of this. I will say that when I watched the promo on SmackDown, I don't think he needs the cheap heat. I really don't. Well, I know he doesn't need the cheap heat because, you know, the heat is scalding already. So I don't think he really needs to be insulting the fans. I like if he's going to be saying how he's going to destroy all their heroes. I like that because that's sort of the feeling anyway. But, well, I think this is WWE's lack of subtlety when it comes to heels and baby faces. And I'll address that in another segment. But just to wrap this all up, in another time, Bootista would have been just fine. You take a look at The Rock. You take a look at his character when he first really skyrocketed. He was playing this arrogant heel. When he was so good at it that people just warmed to him. They thought, all right, this guy is so good at being cocky that I like that. And yeah, he actually kind of, you wanted to be like that, you know. He had that factor. And maybe Bootista at one point had that, and maybe that's how people felt, but it's just not the time for that anymore. That actually will get you hated. And I really find that fascinating. It's like how the Hulk Hogan routine, at one point, the fans loved that. Oh, that's respectable. That's really admirable. And he had Kurt Angle in, I think it was 2000, when he first came into the WWF. And he did pretty much the same thing. And people hated it. And when you're in tune with that, that's when you're just right on the money. And I think, you know, money's the term because you're going to make more money. I don't know. I don't run a wrestling promotion. I just talk about it on the internet. But hey, I love it when they're in tune, and sometimes when they're not in tune, you've got to shout at them until they realize what's up. What's up? Come on, Michael. When he says what's up, you say what's up. When he says we say, oh, Michael.